Welcome back to another pedalboard walkthrough video for this year. I did one several months ago and just a lot has changed since then. A lot has changed on the board, a lot has changed off of the board too. And then also just kind of the way I've been approaching tones in general has been pretty different. So I figured I'd end the year strong by walking through how I'm using this rig. So like I said, there have been some changes off of the board, and the first thing I want to touch on is actually with this guitar. So this is the Citizen C2 guitar. I'm absolutely loving it. I've been using it most of the year so far. And when I got this, I had it installed with Lambertone Chroma pickups, but I just found I was wanting a little bit more body out of the bridge pickup. So I ended up moving to a Fralin Modern PAF pickup and put that here in the bridge, and it is sounding awesome. I love what it's done for my sound. So I've got that in the bridge. I still have a Lambertone Chroma in the neck. I like that it still gives me kind of that chimey single coily type of thing if I want to move over to the neck pickup. But that's kind of how I'm using the guitar at the moment. But for today, I'll be running this guitar into the board and going out into two ToneX pedals. On the left, I'm gonna have an AC30, and on the right is going to be a Benson Chimera. They're both the Tone Factor advanced captures. I've been using those lately too and love the way those sound. So to jump into the signal chain, the first thing I go into is actually underneath the board, and it's the Pinstripe pedals multi-buffer, and I love this thing. As you add more cabling and more pedals, usually it's really helpful to throw a buffer in there somewhere. So I love what this does. I love that it has two outputs as well. So out of the first output, I'm actually going out into my tuner here. So it's really nice. It's kind of out of my chain. I don't really need to worry about any extra signal loss or anything like that, and I can keep it on all the time, which is great. So I've got that going out of the first output, and then the rest of my signal is going out of the output 2 side, which has that Jensen transformer. So it just sounds really clean, sounds really, really great, and definitely keeps my signal nice and strong. So going out of the multi-buffer, I'm going into the compressor. So that is going to be the Barber Electronics Tone Press right up here. And I leave it on all the time. You know, you'll hear it here in a second. I've got a decent amount of blend and sustain added in, and just really love what it does to my sound. So here's how things are sounding. I'll just play with it off for a minute so you can hear kind of what we're working with at really just a bass tone level. And I'll add it on so you can hear what that sounds like. So out of the tone press, I go into my octave pedal. So I'm using the Electro Harmonics Pitch Fork. I love this thing. It is super versatile. I've had it for a couple of years now, and it does regular traditional octave as well as a bunch of other crazy things too. And honestly, I'm not really a huge fan of just kind of using regular octave generally. So more often than not, I use this for kind of weird experimental types of things. One of my favorite ways to use it is using the latch function on here. It's kind of like that whammy effect. So you can see it's basically going to engage. When I hold the pedal down, you'll see that light turn on. And then once I let go, it disengages. So it's really cool. You can set it to kind of whatever interval you want. And when you engage that, it'll kind of shoot up and then shoot back down to the original note. So here's what that would sound like in context. So definitely a lot of fun. There's definitely a time and place for that type of thing. And the reason I like to have that before my drives is because the top end on this pedal definitely gets a little bit wild. You kind of hear it in this clip too, especially when you go kind of into those higher octaves. It can get pretty ear piercing. So it's nice to have it before the drives because it helps kind of mitigate just a little bit of that ice pickiness to the top end. So out of the Pitchfork, I go into the 1981 Inventions LVL. I love this pedal so much. This is my other always on. So I have this on all the time in addition to my compressor too. And I just have it set up as kind of like a clean boost. Really, it's just adding a little bit of grit, a little bit of character from the pedal, and a little bit of volume too. So here's just what that sounds like on and off. So I feel like I could talk about the LVL all day. I just love what it does. But kind of in a nutshell, I like that it brings kind of its own characteristic to things, but also just kind of gives a little bit more of a push into my signal. It keeps things sounding really clear. So even once I add in a bunch of effects and things like that too, you could hear it still felt relatively clean as far as kind of like a bass core tone, like an always on type of thing. It's got just a little bit of hair, but it definitely would sound nice and full in the mix. And if I ever need to just kind of dial things back a little bit, I could always turn it off or just kind of turn my volume knob just down a little bit too to get it a little bit cleaner. So going out of the LVL, we go into the drive section here. And first we go into the Twilight Pulse Audio Works Constant. I think I got that. It's a bit of a mouthful. The Twilight Pulse Audio Works Constant. It's kind of like a modified light speed on the left, and then on the right, it's kind of like an EP boost. And I absolutely love this thing. It's so great as a first stage type of thing. It does higher gain sounds really well. I kind of just have this as like a stage one type of thing. And out of the constant, I go into the Benson Preamp. I love this pedal. I've had this on my board for a long time, and I've used it in so many different ways, but for right now, I'm just using it as kind of like a stage two medium gain drive type of thing. So I'll just kind of throw on some of these drives. I'll throw on wet effects too, so you can just kind of hear the differences in how these are sounding. So those two sound great. I love what they're doing. And the nice thing too is the right side here, this EP boost, I've got it before everything else as far as drives go. So for example, maybe if I want the Benson to just have a little bit more gain, or even the constant, if I want that left side, just have a little bit more gain, I can throw that boost on before everything, kind of gain things up a little bit more before we kind of get to this Germanium Boost we'll touch on here in a little bit. That's after everything else, pushing more volume. So definitely have a lot of options as far as drives go, but it's super simple. So, you know, I like the balance that we've got going on here. So going out of the Benson, I go into this fuzz pedal, which I am absolutely obsessed with at the moment. You don't see fuzz super often kind of in the worship space, but it's just been a lot of fun to kind of unlock some new tones, just kind of push me in a little bit of a different way. And this is the Land Devices HP2. It's a harmonic percolator. And this is super versatile as well. I mean, it's a fuzz pedal, but you definitely can dial things back. Actually, kind of where I've got it about right now to be more of just kind of like a high gain or like a medium gain overdrive. So it's super versatile. It's got this switch on here, right down here, where when it's flipped onto the right side, it's more of a kind of an open, almost overdrive type of thing. And then when you flip it over to the left side, like this, that is going to be more of kind of like a spitty, gatey, Velcro-y fuzz type of thing, which is really cool. So here's just a little bit of what that sounds like. So definitely a lot of fun. I threw on a doubler from the Chroma Console there towards the end. Just really fills things out. Sounds really huge. So love the way that sounds. But really, you know, from there, the last kind of like drive option that I have is this boost here. This is a Germanium Boost built by Tone Ranger Audio, and he did a great job with this. It sounds really great. I was looking for a Benson Germanium Boost and was just kind of having a hard time finding one. So he built me this, and I love the way it sounds. It just sounds huge with, you know, whatever you stack before it, whatever you add this on top of, especially for like single note lead lines and things like that. it just sounds huge. I love what it does. So here's what that sounds like. So out of the drives, I go into the volume pedal. I like to run the volume pedal after my drives so I can swell in with a fully saturated signal as opposed to the other way around. So I've got my volume pedal. This is just one of the Dunlop Mini volume pedals. Not really much to talk about with this. It does the job, it does what it needs to do. So really out of there, I go into the Walrus Audio Julianna. This is a vibrato and a chorus pedal, and this thing is awesome. And I had to get the alternate artwork on this. I'm a huge Onyx coffee fan. I'm just a huge coffee fan in general, but Onyx is definitely my favorite. So when I saw that they had this collaboration with Walrus Audio, I knew that I had to grab this. So this is a really fun pedal. I've got for vibrato, I've got kind of just a pretty subtle vibrato sound dialed in. This is kind of what I use the majority of the time if I'm going for that. And then I've got a chorus sound that I like to use as well. So here's what that sounds like in context. So the Julianna is actually the start of my stereo signal. So I go stereo out of that into the Chroma Console. And the Chroma Console, man, I don't even know where to begin with this because there's so much that I can do. I feel like I'm constantly changing how I use it. I have a handful of presets that I use all the time. But it's been a nice pedal to kind of push my boundaries a little bit. It's kind of pushed on my comfort levels and what I'm used to in a good way. It's been really nice just to kind of try some new things, try using some sounds I don't normally use. It's kind of this Swiss Army knife that I'm using for modulation effects, as well as some delays too that I can stack with the timeline. The delays in this thing are really, really great. I love the way that these sound. But it's got all kinds of other stuff too. Maybe just to first kind of talk about with the Chroma Console, probably what I'm using it for the most at the moment is a lot of dual delay stuff. So I've got this really cool Analog Endeavors expression fader down here at the bottom right side of the board. And I've got this hooked up to the Morningstar. So really I can use expression for kind of whatever I want to use. But for now, the way that I'm using it is really just connected to the Chroma Console's analog delay. So as I fade this fader in, it's going to bring in just an eighth note analog delay. And the more that I bring it up, the more present and the more repeats it's going to have. And then the lower down that I fade this down, it'll get a little bit more subtle if I just want to, subtly bring in some extra kind of dual delay stuff. So I'll show you the dual delay, just kind of how that sounds, but I'll also just kind of walk through some of the other presets for how I'm using the Chroma Console and, kind of what that sounds like. So definitely a lot of cool sounds packed into this thing. Maybe just to kind of recap what we just heard, we did the dual delay thing with an analog delay from the Chroma Console and then a tape delay from the timeline and stacked those together. But then, the other sounds that we did, you heard the doubler a little bit earlier when we used the fuzz, just to kind of widen things a little bit more. The cassette mode on here is this really cool kind of, it's like a tape warble. It almost sounds like a vibrato, but it's kind of like the wow and flutter, kind of the warble that you'd get from a tape delay, but just as an effect by itself. So I love that. That's kind of like an alternative to a vibrato that I use sometimes. The lo-fi setting is just basically a vibrato with the filter turned down, so it sounds kind of lo-fi. You can be on the bridge pickup, and it just sounds really, really cool in some of those down moments. The tremolo is pretty straightforward. The cool thing too with the Chroma Console is that it's totally in sync with MIDI clock. So as I'm moving through different songs and I send different BPMs, it's always going to be in sync, whether I'm using a delay or I'm using a tremolo or something time-based like that. It's always going to be in sync with my other delays and stuff like that, which is cool. So out of the Chroma Console, I go into the Strymon Timeline and then the Strymon BigSky. These two need no introduction. You've seen these, you've heard these before. I'll actually just kind of walk through my workflow just a little bit. As far as kind of how I like to use these, really for the timeline, I generally use tape delays almost all the time. And then usually for this B setting, I'll have some sort of like a special type of delay. So, here I've got rewind. This is basically just one of my reverse delays that I've got set up. But let's see, I know another one of these has... So chill, we've got chill here. This is using the ice delay on here, so it's got some kind of cool octave things. So usually I kind of just keep, like I said, that A setting. I'll kind of progress through either more pronounced delays or less pronounced delays, kind of whatever I need. And then usually that B setting, I'll have that programmed to be some sort of a special type of thing if I want that. So that's mainly how I'm using the timeline right now. And then for the BigSky, I've kind of had the same workflow for a long time with this. Really, I like to just use, for different kind of flavors of reverb, I like to use just three, kind of a small, medium, large size reverb. So, we're on cloud right now. Cloud 1 is going to be more of kind of like maybe an always on type of thing. It's a little less subtle for the most part. Cloud 2 is definitely going to be more of like a washy, you'd probably use this on a pretty wet lead line or something like that. And then the third setting usually is going to be some form of a swell type of setting, probably something really, really wet. You heard this a little bit ago with the Chroma Console, some of the crazy kind of ambient sounds usually is going to be that third option. So I have all my presets for the Strymons, the timeline, and the BigSky, and the Chroma Console actually all on my website. If you have any of these pedals and you want to check out any of these presets for yourself, I'll have the link just right down here in the description. Now, I definitely want to unpack how I'm using the Morningstar MIDI controller here. You've been seeing me kind of control different things with that throughout the video, and honestly, I do plan to make more of a deep dive with this video, as far as programming and things like that. So it's in the works. It's going to happen, I promise. But I'll just kind of walk through pretty quickly how I'm using it currently. It's pretty simple for the most part. I try to keep it very open-ended, so I'm not too locked into song presets or anything like that. But basically, kind of on my home page here, hopefully you can see everything okay. But here on kind of my home page, the left side here, the top left and the bottom left, it's really simple. All it does is scroll through my presets. So depending on what flavor I want, I can just go up or down and kind of progress through my different sounds that way. So pretty simple there. And I kind of have the same setup for the timeline, except it's all condensed down to one button. So let me actually just go down to one and start here. So you'll see this is my 8th delay and it's on the lowest setting. So this is probably what I would use for like a rhythm part or something like that. It's just kind of out of the way. But each time that I hit this, it's going to move to, hopefully you can see that on the screen. It says timeline 2 now, timeline 3. And so I'm kind of progressing through more pronounced different delay sounds. And like I was saying earlier, it's always going to be kind of moving up through the settings on the A side. So the B side is always going to be available for some kind of a special delay whenever I want it. But it's really nice just to kind of have it all on one button here. So I've got my eighth tape delay settings, and then I have dotted eighth tape delay settings here too, depending on kind of what size I want from there. So definitely love using that. Besides that, I've got this delay button here on the top right. You can see here it's going to engage on the Chroma Console. This is basically just that analog delay. So if I want to have that on and then control it with this expression pedal down here on the bottom right, kind of fade that in, I can have it on, or I can just turn it off if I don't really want that. So I like having that on the front page because I do tend to use that pretty often. So I've got that there. This Chroma button on the top just takes me to another page, and this is just more of my Chroma Console presets, which we were taking a look at before. So we saw a lot of these, tested these out, and then I just have this back button, which takes me right back to the home page, which is nice. So really, if I need to make any just quick changes or add any quick sounds, I've got kind of everything within reach. It's super easy if I want to throw on like the supernova sound, go for something a little bit more ambient, a little bit more crazy. I can just page right over here, grab it, go right back, and then I'm locked right back in the zone, which is really great. So we've got that. And then the last button here is this BPM set button, which is awesome. There's a lot of power packed into this. Basically, I've got 4 songs programmed. Most of the time my church does no more than 4. Usually we do about 3 or 4 on a Sunday. So I have each of these different songs programmed to different BPMs. So let's say we're playing Good Plans here on the bottom left, and we're going into Holy Forever next. You'll see this BPM change. So if I hit Holy Forever, it's going to go to 72 BPM now, and then I can just go right back, ready to go. Let's say we move on to the next song. Now we're going to go into Who Is Like the Lord. We just hit that, and boom, now we're at 78 BPM. So it's really nice. You've got everything you need as far as kind of time-based stuff goes, MIDI clock. But it's nice too because it's really flexible. So for instance, maybe if you just want to tap in a new delay, I'm going to do something a little bit quicker. I just tapped in 186 BPM or 185 BPM in case you wanted to do something really quick. You can tap it in that way, or you can just hold it and then literally dial in exactly the BPM you need from here, and then just save and exit, and then you're good to go. So yeah, I am kind of changing the way I'm using this MIDI controller relatively often, but I do like the flexibility that it gives me to just really get anything that I need just at a moment's notice. And I know I touched on this earlier, but the fact that this expression fader down here is plugged into the Morningstar, which is talking to all of these MIDI controllable pedals, like the Chroma Console, the Timeline, the BigSky, I'll be able to really kind of customize how I'm using that for really any of these sounds. So like, obviously I'm using this for the dual delay thing right now, but if I wanted to change this so it maybe controls the wetness of my reverb, I could do that if I want to. I could have it control my timeline if I wanted to. I could have it do all kinds of different things. So very, very versatile. Definitely going to be experimenting with that a little bit more as we keep moving forward. But bringing us back to the signal chain, really I just go out of the BigSky into the 2 ToneX pedals like I mentioned before, and then out of those into the Pinstripe pedals, DISO plus, to kind of finish up the chain. So really that's it. That is the pedal board. Again, really, really happy with the sounds I'm getting out of this right now. Hit me with your questions. If you've got any questions at all about this setup or anything here, I love getting to connect with you guys. So definitely hit me with your questions. And I'll also leave this video here for you to check out next. So I will see you in the next one.